Michael Vermeer. I'm with the Johns Hopkins University Applied Physics Lab, and I'm the Integrated Adaptive Cyber Defense Engagement Lead. And one of the products we have developed as part of this overall portfolio effort is we've developed a number of education modules for upper level undergraduate, graduate level students to really be able to discuss and get some of the ideas of the advantages and the issues involved with use of SOAR technologies. So the things I'm going to cover today is just a quick touching on what is Security Orchestration Automation and Response, SOAR. Big buzzword in the marketplace right now, and I'll kind of orient folks that might not be familiar with it during this discussion. And then why, do we consider it a crucial part of cybersecurity related education, both on the computer science side, if you will, and also on the business side for people that are looking to move into executive positions in business. And then, discussing the individual modules. The first module is a business perspective look at SOAR. The second module is making use of SOAR, so it's more of a technical perspective. And we also developed a lab module that's meant to be used in conjunction with Module B. And then I'll just open it up for general discussions. So what is SOAR? Okay, so SOAR isn't a one-item thing, right? It's a combination of the capabilities that exist currently in your enterprise cybersecurity defense, and it includes an orchestrator. Okay, so the orchestrator lets you automate to the degree to which you are comfortable detection, response, and recovery operations within your enterprise. And it's using the existing capabilities that you have, but it's allowing them to execute at machine speed within your enterprise to counter things that are detected and also to help with recovery. And this is done through the use of playbooks and workflows. So playbooks are the human readable representation of the series of actions that result in the desired outcome for your organization. And then the workflows are the machine executable level representation of individual playbook activities. So the key here is the playbooks are what people look at to approve the overall workflow, and then the workflows are more for the individual applications to take commands and execute. So how do SOAR platforms work in an environment? So in a traditional environment, you have a human, a SOC analyst that's kind of in the middle of everything and responsible for the majority of actions and activities. So, see an alert, click on a response, type in an IP address. You get the idea here that the human is in the middle of the response loop. So after implementation of SOAR, the idea here is a whole number of activities can be orchestrated between the security tools and the network devices. And what you're automating are the well-defined, execution activities that require really minimum actual analysis. So the idea here is that you're no longer the center of everything. You're more monitoring what's going on, and then your human analyst can work on the things that are higher value and situations that you just aren't ready to automate or can't really automate at this time. What are the benefits? Well, okay, so it addresses a number of the critical shortcomings of today's enterprise and cybersecurity landscape. So you're automating the routine task so the analyst can focus on the hard technical analysis and the value-added activities. If nothing else, it's going to reduce the boredom of your SOC staff and really make them feel like they're more valuable to the enterprise. It allows your enterprise in many situations to operate at machine speed and cyber relevant time as far as detection and response activities. And the other key thing that we found through different piloting efforts, a large value add for organizations is it helps ensure consistent application of the policies and procedures that your organization has developed. And again, what that does is it heavily moves toward elimination of the differences between different shifts, the way different people approach problems, and it really adds to consistency in response actions. But what is it not? Okay, so it's not a quick turnaround solution. It takes some work to implement, it takes some work to maintain, and then eventually you'll want to enhance your capabilities in that area, and that also takes work. It's not going to replace your people. All right, that's a pretty big misconception. A number of folks, go into it initially to look at staffing reductions. Well, that just doesn't happen. Okay, and it is not a one-way road toward complete automation. So you don't have to fully automate. It gives you the ability, really, in some ways, to be dialable within your organization. So why is this topic a crucial part of cybersecurity-related education? Okay, so both the business management and computer science communities really need familiarization with SOAR technologies, and in many ways, more importantly, the impact on the enterprise. Right? SOAR technologies are a major part of changing the defensive landscape to match the speed, scale, and sophistication of the malicious actor. And by malicious actor, I'm talking both, insider threat sort of activities and also external threats. The use of SOAR technologies really allows you to better utilize your limited human cybersecurity resources and leverage the existing enterprise investments that you've already made in capabilities both on your perimeter and the internal portions of your enterprise. And it increases the speed that the alerts can be remediated, as well as enable really consistent application of organizational policies and procedures when responding to those alerts. So really the bottom line here is it's part of the current and evolving cybersecurity landscape, and you really need to come out of school with awareness of the benefits, capabilities, and implementation issues that really are foundational to preparing the students of today for the workplace, both of today and tomorrow. What does each module contain? Well, it contains a set of instructor's notes, student versions of the presentations and homework exercises, and instructor versions of those presentations and homework exercises with solutions and recommendations for in-class assignments. The use case A package, it uses a business case describing the breach of a fictional bank, RSR bank. The breach and the impact are described if the students do an analysis of the enterprise network architecture to determine what weaknesses were exploited and how they were exploited during the overall incident. The mitigations for those weaknesses are determined as part of a student-level exercise. And then there's discussion of how SOAR technologies can be used to mitigate those weaknesses and respond to the breach. And then, the students' findings are discussed during the class. And use case B is more of a technical level exercise, looking at actual implementation. So it continues the RSR bank narrative, and this is after the C-suite has decided to deploy a SOAR capability in their enterprise. It walks through the steps needed to deploy SOAR. So the conversations and the discussions that you need to have internally within your organization to actually implement SOAR, and then what decisions need to be made, and those decisions are described and discussed with possible impacts and further things that might need to be done really at the enterprise management and resource level to execute. And then it goes into the giving students the tools to develop the needed playbooks and workflows that are part of the module. And then the lab module, we call that where the rubber meets the road. It's an optional part of module B. You don't have to have it. And the use of the module, it does require the institution to have an environment where the students could exercise the developed workflows. So that presumes an environment where you have differing products that at least mimic endpoint security, network security, differing response, type activities. And we provide in the instructor's notes a number of vendors that have agreed to make their products, their orchestration products, available to academic institutions at special pricing. This really boils down to a number of these products. If you go to buy full-blown licenses, academic institutions aren't going to do it for instruction. They can be very expensive, and we've been able to impress on the vendors. It really helps them going down the road if students come into the workplaces already familiar with how to utilize their products. It makes their job a whole lot easier when they're dealing with an organization that's trying to implement SOAR. So how do you get this stuff? So I've uploaded the modules on the Clark website. They're awaiting review. Not clear in my mind how that process works or doesn't work, but the modules are there, and we really strongly prefer that they be distributed from the Clark website. And one of the reasons is a practical reason of when our task ends, there's going to be limited time that we'll be able to continue to support distribution of these education modules to the community. So, I'm putting out here that, I really would like these modules reviewed relatively quickly and put on the Clark website for more longer-term distribution and use. But in the interim, you can send an email to icdeducate@jhuapl.edu, and I will send you a box invite to download the modules. If I get hit with a pretty high number of requests, the response might be pretty slow, to come back to you. But I will get you the invite so you can download the modules for use in your own, curriculum going forward. And we do request that don't post the whole module on a publicly available site because we'd rather prevent, at least as long as we can, compromise of the instructor materials and the and the solution sets. So that wraps up my introduction, if you will, to SOAR and a overview of the module materials. And now I'd like to take any questions. So I don't have a demo to show, but what I will do is I'll go ahead and open up some of the materials and then share my screen. That way you can see the lab modules and the other materials here. Okay, so what I'm sharing now is out of Module B. It's a deep dive going into the playbook creation, and it walks through, really the details of creating a playbook. And walks through, how do you construct a playbook? So the lab exercise is they will take the developed playbooks developed during Module B, and they will actually implement them in your lab environment. Now, the detailed procedures are going to depend on the orchestration product and the cybersecurity capabilities that you have either emulated or actually existing in your environment. So it's going to vary by institution and how you have access, have the students access your environment. Whether it's a VM that you hand them a piece of media and they spin it up on their own separate computer, or if it's a more centralized environment where they log in remotely. So the details are going to be different for each, each institution. So really, at the end of the day is, it depends. And I don't have a demo to show, if you will, of the instruction modules. I have the actual materials. So if there's something that you want to see specifically from either Module A or Module B, just go ahead and load it up in the chat, and I'll be glad to show it to you. Yeah, so it could be something like a cyber range. If you are lucky enough to have an academic institution that has a cyber range, or you have access to a cyber range, nothing says you couldn't take a portion of that cyber range, load up an orchestrator into that environment, and use it as the platform for your students to actually exercise an orchestrator and utilize the playbooks and workflows that they develop as part of the course. Again, it depends. No thoughts to integrate this material with applications like Blackboard. Part of this is a sponsored development effort, right? So we have neither the resources or go ahead to integrate in something like Blackboard, but nothing says that once you have the modules, you integrate it into Blackboard for your own use. So a number of the vendors are working on virtual modules to actually support this. There'll be VMware images that they're slated to have available to educational institutions. So that's a very good thing. The idea there is make it as available to as wide a swath of institutions as possible. And, really, because there's going to be ones that are, there's been a fair amount of investment, and ones that are, less rich, if you will, on organic resources to execute these modules. And I'm thinking here of things like, community colleges, things like that. Are there any other questions? Anything else on the chat? So I don't know how many VMs would be good. It would depend on your configuration. If you had a configuration where the individual tools were spun up in their own virtual environment, it could be a good number. But again, it depends on how you're configuring your environment, what you want to put into a VM. Really, I mean, it depends, right? It depends on your individual situation. But there's no optimal number, if you will, of VMs, to implement these education modules. And actually, to be fair, I mean, other than the lab module, there's no requirement that you use VMs to utilize modules A and B. The lab module is optional. I mean, it's preferred because it gives students some hands-on, implementation practice of playbooks and workflows that they develop, and we think it greatly enhances the educational materials, but there's no requirement that you use the lab module. So the last, for example, Kali Linux, Windows 10, Server 2016, yes. Again, it depends on the environment that you wish to emulate. All right. I mean, so again, it depends. Right. Here at the lab, because of the research work we do, we have an extensive, virtual environment. But again, a whole lot of educational institutions aren't going to have it or have access to something like that. So again, it depends on your resources. It depends on what you've purchased and what you're using. A number of institutions that we've sent out modules to, their larger institutions have bought full-blown licenses of a number of the orchestration products for their own use. And in a case like that, you can kind of get with the vendor that's servicing your institution and see if you can work a deal, if you will, where you can utilize the larger enterprise license for educational use. So that's an option, but that you have to explore that directly with the vendor's representative that's supporting your institution. Yeah, I agree with the last comment. I mean, I don't know if emulating a single endpoint would really show the value, but I do agree. Again, it depends on what you want to emulate. You could have full-blown, multiple network security, endpoint security, data security products. You could have a whole number of things. It all depends on how rich of an environment that you're able to emulate and, what you want for, really the larger curriculum. I mean, you can use these modules standalone, but we see them probably more integrated into a larger curriculum on both the business side and the computer science side. Is it used in cyber competitions? Well, so I would say not a hackathon, if you will, or like a competition capture the flag sort of thing. But that said, the use of SOAR, if it was a larger type competition where it was defend a larger enterprise against an intruder or red team, whatever you want to call it, nothing says that orchestration technologies couldn't be part of a defensive strategy with a good bit of forethought to at least reduce the noise for the defenders, so what they can see is the more sophisticated activities of a malicious actor. I agree, it'd be a cool example. I mean, very large scale to hack a national election as an infrastructure. But keeping in mind, there is no election infrastructure. If you've seen one, you've seen one, right? So different states and localities have widely varying infrastructures, in terms of both sophistication and how, in many ways, centrally managed they are. Good example, looking at the caucuses in Iowa, where they used an app developed in a couple of months and things didn't go well. So again, I mean, what do you want to emulate? And actually, I think, during this election year, you know, emulating, getting with your local officials and emulating to some extent a local election information infrastructure could be an option that might really interest the students. And again, I mean, you know, one target that you could use as a thing to defend would be the, you know, voter registration databases that tend to be more centralized. And beyond their use in an election, they have a good bit of, you know, privately identifiable information in them. So they're pretty rich, ripe targets for someone to go after. Any other questions, chat?
Any additional questions?
I want to thank everybody for the chance to introduce the education modules. And looking forward to people, you know, when you send me a request to download the modules, I mean, feel free to reach back after you've used them for a semester. Give us some feedback. Are there things we could do to maybe improve the modules, possible things we could pass on to the vendors that we're working with, maybe enhance, you know, their academic products. Oh, there you go. And so, again, thank you, everybody. And I'm going to go ahead and sign off and turn it back over to the moderator.
Thank you, Michael. So I've gone ahead and put the recording link in, or the place that you can find the recording link in the chat box. And if you guys are staying for the next presentation, we're just going to take a quick break and we'll be back at 11 o'clock Pacific time, 2 o'clock Eastern time to continue on with our next speaker. So don't go anywhere.